Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison. Brianna Zunino Dennison, born March 29, 1988. Brianna's parents are Jeff and Bridget Dennison. When Brianna was 6, her father passed away, causing immense pain for the family. However, with the support of her loved ones, she persevered through the difficult time. Brianna spent her childhood in Reno, Nevada, and Mendocino, California, her mother's hometown. Her love of travel and exploration took her to numerous countries, including Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Italy, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. Brianna has a deep affection for children and animals, especially her dog Ozzy. She completed her high school education at Reno High School in 2006 and is majoring in child psychology as a sophomore at Santa Barbara City College. During winter break, on January 20, 2008, Brianna returned to her hometown of Reno from Santa Barbara to spend time with friends and family. Brianna and her friends regularly attended events organized by Summer Winter Action Tours LLC, a tour company that caters to college students. They also attended the Martin Luther King Jr. Gala weekend in Reno. That day, Brianna returned home around 4 a.m. to her friend's house near the University of Nevada campus. Brianna slept over at McKay Court's house. However, when McKay Court woke up the next morning at around 9 a.m., Brianna was no longer there. A small bloodstain was found on the pillow where she had slept, and her cell phone, purse, and shoes were still at the house. McKay Court then contacted Brianna's parents and the local police in an attempt to locate Brianna. Police arrived and examined the scene. In the following days, police conducted forensic tests at the McKay Court home, where Brianna had been staying at the time of her abduction. During the investigation, police discovered DNA on the doorknob that belonged to an unidentified male. The blood on the pillow was confirmed to be Brianna's, leading police to focus on a theory that Brianna had been abducted. Police searched for Brianna in the University of Nevada Reno area, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the search. A DNA sample found on a doorknob the night Brianna disappeared was matched to at least 2 previous sex crimes in the same area. One occurred on November 13th, and the other on December 16, 2007. On January 29, 2008, a Reno woman said she knew a victim who had been held at gunpoint in a garage on the University of Nevada Reno campus in October 2007. Police released a description of the suspect based on identifying information provided by women who were sexually assaulted by the suspect. In an effort to find Brianna's abductor, police interviewed nearly 100 sex offenders who lived within a mile of the McKay Court home. However, none of them were linked to Brianna's disappearance. A search effort was organized, with some 1,700 volunteers, including then First Lady of Nevada Dawn Gibbons, participating in a virtual search of the area. Sadly, the search yielded no results. On February 15, 2008, a man named Albert Jimenez was returning from his lunch break at a Subway restaurant in Reno. As he walked down the street, he noticed bright orange sheets standing out among a pile of discarded tree branches in a ditch near Reno Business Park. Upon closer inspection, Albert discovered that the orange socks on the feet belonged to a deceased woman. Albert had heard about Brianna Dennison's disappearance, but initially thought the description did not match the person on Brianna's missing person flyer. Without a cell phone, Albert rushed back to his workplace to contact the police to report the incident. Police arrived at the scene and confirmed the victim's identity as Brianna Dennison. The investigation revealed that Brianna had been brutally attacked and murdered. Near her body, police found a pair of panties, which contained DNA from the perpetrator and DNA from an unidentified woman. Police suspected that the panties did not belong to Brianna, believing that they had been left there to distract police. Police then made a public appeal, asking anyone who recognized the panties to come forward to help identify the perpetrator. However, no one came forward. On November 25, 2008, James Michael Bella, 27, of Sparks, Nevada, James was arrested while he was taking his son to the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno. He was booked into the Washoe County Jail on charges of murder, first-degree kidnapping, and sexual assault. Further investigation revealed that James was a former Marine with a history of violence, including a 2001 arrest for threatening his ex-girlfriend's neighbor with a knife. The following day, November 26, 2008, the Reno Police Department held a press conference to confirm that James' DNA matched the DNA found at Brianna's crime scene. During the press conference, it was also revealed that a friend of James' girlfriend anonymously accused James, through the secret witness program on November 1, 2008, after James' girlfriend confided in the friend that she had found underwear in James's truck while they were returning from Washington, where James had taken a job in March 2008. After reports of Brianna's case appeared in the media, including a police sketch of the suspect and a description of a vehicle involved in a similar incident a month earlier, police began questioning James, anonymously provided by a witness. However, James denied any wrongdoing and refused to provide a DNA sample for analysis. His girlfriend was also questioned by police, and she allowed them to take a DNA sample from her and James' 4-year-old son. DNA testing of James' son showed that, in this case, James' DNA was left at the house where Brianna was abducted and at the scene of the rape. Furthermore, during the trip to Washington, it was discovered that James had sold his truck in Idaho, which matched the description of the vehicle used in the sexual assault. Police announced at a press conference that the truck was being transported back to Reno for a thorough examination and would be used as evidence in the case against James. On May 27, 2010, the jury returned a guilty verdict in James's trial, finding James responsible for the murder of Brianna Dennison. After 9 hours of deliberations, the jury convicted James of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. In an effort to avoid the death penalty, James' defense team presented mitigating circumstances, citing James' traumatic childhood with an alcoholic, abusive father. The jurors rejected the mitigating factors and gave James the death sentence instead. Later, on July 30, 2010, James received 4 more life sentences for other crimes, including rape and kidnapping of 2 victims prior to Brianna's abduction and murder. James's appeals have been denied over. The case of Brianna Zunino Dennison is a story of pain, strength, and determination in the pursuit of justice. Brianna's family remains strong and persistent in the fight for justice. The collective efforts of everyone together make a safer world. And may Brianna rest in peace. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kaler family. James Craig Kaler was born in Weatherford, Texas in 1963, and his future wife, Karen Kaler, was born in the same city 2 years later. They met in the early 1980s while attending a university in Texas. At the time, Craig was a senior studying engineering, and Karen was a freshman in the humanities department. Despite their different fields of study, they quickly discovered common interests and started a romantic relationship. After graduating, they had a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family. They welcomed their first child, Emily, in 1991, followed by Lauren in 1993. The family lived in a cozy house in Weatherford and enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with a higher-than-average income for their area. In 1999, Craig received a lucrative job offer from a major utility company in Weatherford, which coincided with the birth of their son, Sean. Craig adored his son and, with his increased salary, purchased a spacious house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood and a family car. Karen stayed at home to care for their children, and Craig became the primary breadwinner. From the outside, their family appeared to be living a perfect life. Their 3 children have also had many successes in their fields. Emily and Lauren are talented in sports and music. Emily studies at a prestigious pharmacy college and Lauren hopes to attend a conservatory. Sean, on the other hand, showed a keen interest in mathematics and had dreams of becoming an archaeologist. The family's home life seemed idyllic, Craig providing for the family and Karen taking care of the household and raising the children. However, the family was struggling with hidden problems. In 2007, Karen confided in her sister Linda, revealing that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown due to Craig's controlling behavior. Craig exerted total control over Karen's daily life, demanding a detailed account of every expense, no matter how small, and requiring her to report her whereabouts at all times. The family lives on a strict schedule, with Craig setting their daily routines, including bedtime, wake-up time, meal times. This rigidity makes Karen feel suffocated and trapped. Over time, Craig's need for control grew stronger. He became more demanding and selfish, scheduling Karen's every move. She felt like she had no time left for herself, there was only duty to complete. Karen tried to meet her husband's demands, hoping he would ease up and they could return to their normal life. However, Craig seemed to enjoy exerting control and refused to change. Linda was extremely worried about her sister's confide. Like everyone else, she saw Craig as the ideal husband, father, and family man, only to discover he was a controlling man. Despite this, Karen didn't want to break up her family. Additionally, she and her children relied on Craig financially. So, she decided to find a job that would give her a stable income. She joined a local gym without telling her husband, using it as an escape to clear her mind and work through her emotions. She spent several hours there every day, scheduling her time around her husband Craig's work schedule so he wouldn't notice. Not long after, the gym manager noticed her because of her attractive appearance, excellent fitness, and her hard work. Karen was given the chance to work as a fitness with the possibility of a permanent contract. This was a dream come true for her, as she could now get paid for doing something she loved. However, she was worried about how her husband, Craig, would react when he found out. When Craig found out about Karen's new job, she thought he would be angry and forbid her to continue. Surprisingly, he received this news calmly and even seemed pleased that she had found a way to make money on her own. He had a few conditions. She had to be home when he arrived, cook meals, and not let her new job interfere with their intimate life. Karen found these conditions acceptable, as she now had more freedom and independence. As Karen settled into her new job, she met a new instructor named Sonny Reese, and they quickly became friends. For Karen, who had spent years at home with little social interaction, Sonny became a trusted confidant. The two women spent time together at work, went for walks, had coffee, and shared heartfelt conversations. But little did Karen know, this new friendship would soon lead to unexpected romance and a complicated love triangle. It didn't take long for Karen and Sonny's friendship to evolve into a romantic relationship. At first, they kept their feelings a secret from everyone. However, after some time, Karen decided it was necessary to be honest with her husband, Craig. She spent months preparing for this conversation, searching for the right words and worrying about the potential consequences. Eventually, she confessed to Craig. Craig's reaction to his wife's revelation was surprisingly calm. However, the next day, he made an unexpected condition for accepting Karen's relationship with Sonny, which was that he wanted to be a part of it. Karen was shocked and unsure of how to respond to her husband's talk. Nevertheless, Craig took the initiative and began wooing Sonny, sending her flowers and gifts. He seemed to view this as an opportunity to revitalize his intimate life and bring new passion to his marriage. Initially, Karen and Sonny agreed to Craig's proposal. However, they soon realized that his intentions were aimed at domination. However, their unusual love triangle was short-lived. Craig demanded that Karen end the affair immediately. Despite this, Karen continued to see Sonny, as she had genuinely fallen in love. After almost 20 years of marriage, Karen seemed ready to leave her husband for someone new. This led to a series of secret actions, including moving to another state, scheduling secret meetings. In an attempt to salvage his family, Craig thought it best to relocate to another state. He started job hunting, sending out his resume, and soon secured a role as a water director for a large company in Columbia, Missouri, not far from Kansas. Craig hoped that by moving to a new state, his wife's affair with Sonny would end, and their family life would normalize. However, the summer 2008 move proved challenging for the family, as the kids had to switch schools, make new friends, and adapt to a new city. Although the family was already financially comfortable, Craig's new job nearly doubled his previous salary from Weatherford. Despite his increased responsibilities and work hours, Craig mistakenly believed he had successfully removed Sonny from his wife's life. However, Karen and Sonny continued to communicate regularly through calls, texts, and secret meetings. They would meet halfway, spend a couple of hours in a roadside hotel, and then return home. At this point, Karen realized her marriage was over. She no longer loved Craig, and it was only a matter of time before they divorced. These clandestine meetings persisted until December 2008. At the New Year's Eve celebration that year, the Kaler family went back to their hometown to reconnect with relatives and friends. Sonny was also in attendance at the gathering. Initially, Karen and Sonny kept a low profile, merely exchanging greetings. As the celebration continues and the alcohol slowly affects Karen and Sonny's behavior, they seem to have no regard for social norms. They became inseparable, openly showing affection by holding hands, sharing romantic glances, they even kissed. Craig's anger boiled over into fury after Karen publicly humiliated him by revealing her affair at a party attended by dozens of acquaintances. He lashed out at Karen and Sonny before dragging Karen away from the party. In his rage, Craig lost control and physically assaulted Karen, ripping her dress and slapping her, causing her to fall and hit her head. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their marriage. A few days later, Karen announced she was leaving Craig and initiated divorce proceedings, seeking custody of their children. Initially, Craig attempted to apologize and salvage their relationship for the sake of the children. But Karen was resolute. She said they should divorce, causing Craig to contact friends and family, begging them to convince Karen to reconsider. In the spring of 2009, Craig and Karen's marriage continued to deteriorate. Despite Craig's attempts to salvage their relationship, Karen made it clear she was leaving him for Sonny and she had never been truly happy in their marriage. The tension between them escalated into physical violence, with Craig grabbing Karen during an argument, leaving bruises on her arms. Karen reported the incident to the police, leading to Craig's arrest. After the incident, Karen took the children and moved out without waiting for the divorce to be finalized. Craig was devastated by her departure and even more so when he discovered that his daughters, Emily and Lauren, were siding with their mother. They told him that they had never seen their mother so happy, which Craig perceived as a betrayal. As a result, he cut off contact with his daughters, only spending time with his son Sean on weekends. Despite the ongoing divorce proceedings, Craig held on to the hope that Karen would change her mind and return to him. His desire to control her led him to engage in jealous behavior, including stalking her and attempting to install a hidden camera in her home. To pursue this, Craig sacrificed his work, initially taking vacation time, then claiming illness, and eventually skipping work altogether without explanation. This reckless behavior resulted in Craig's termination from his job. Without a steady income, he was forced to move in with his parents as he could no longer afford to live on his own. With ample free time, Craig began stalking Karen, prompting her to take him to court to obtain a restraining order. In November 2009, just before Thanksgiving, Karen took her children to visit their 89-year-old grandmother, Dorothy White, in Burlingame, Kansas. On the evening of November 29th, the Burlingame police received a distress call about a suspicious van and reports of gunshots. Dorothy's neighbors reported witnessing a small truck pull up to her house. A man exit the vehicle and enter the house. They claimed to have heard screams and gunshots, but were uncertain. The man then left the house, got back into the truck, and sped away. The neighbors did not attempt to apprehend him, fearing he was armed. When police arrived, they were met by 10-year-old Sean Kaler, who was frantically calling for help. Although Sean was unable to explain what had happened, it was clear that a horrific scene awaited the police. Inside the home, near the front door, Sonny was found lying in a pool of blood but surprisingly still alive despite having 2 gunshot wounds. In the kitchen, police discovered the lifeless body of 44-year-old Karen, who had been shot in the chest and then fatally shot at close range in the head. The body of her oldest daughter, 18-year-old Emily, was found between a wall and a couch. It appeared that Emily had attempted to hide from her enraged father but was caught and killed with 2 point-blank shots. Lauren, found in a pool of blood in the second-floor bedroom, was still alive but weakly called for help and repeatedly said that her father was the one who did it. Dorothy and Lauren were rushed to a nearby hospital's intensive care unit. Despite the doctor's efforts, Lauren died on December 1st due to massive blood loss and internal organ damage. Her great-grandmother passed away a few hours later. Sean, the only surviving witness, was in shock. Psychologists worked with him, but a thorough interrogation was necessary as he was the only living witness to the tragic events at his great-grandmother's house. Sean recounted that evening, stating that his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he approached her to ask for his favorite pie. Suddenly, the back door swung open, and his father entered with a shotgun, pointing it at Karen without a word. He shot her, then moved closer and fired again. Sean was initially frozen in horror. His father then turned to Sean but didn't aim the gun. Instead, Craig stared at Sean silently and intently. Sean realized he had to escape. So he jumped out the open back door. He ran towards the main entrance, hoping to alert his grandmother, sisters, and call for help. However, upon reaching the threshold, he heard several more gunshots. Fearing what he might find inside, Sean hid in a small outbuilding. He heard more gunshots and waited in terror, afraid that his father would come after him. Craig Kaler was immediately added to the wanted list, with a warning that he was armed and extremely dangerous. As police received multiple reports of a speeding truck, they were able to quickly determine the direction the gunman was heading. At one point, Craig abandoned his vehicle in a wooded area and began walking down a deserted road. Law enforcement soon caught up with him and apprehended him the next morning. Upon arrest, police found the rifle and ammunition in the back seat of the abandoned vehicle, along with prescription medication for depression and anxiety disorders near the driver's seat. Craig did not resist arrest and appeared confused and frightened. He admitted to being armed with a gun and a hunting knife, but claimed he did not intend to use them. He also acknowledged that he had done something terrible, which he believed the police already knew about. At the police station, Craig fully confessed to his crimes and opened up to the investigating officer. He shared how his wife had cheated on him with someone named Sonny and how they had humiliated him in front of friends at a New Year's Eve party. He explained how his attempts to save his marriage had cost him his job and what was left of his self-respect. Craig became emotional, stating that he didn't know how he had decided to take such drastic action and felt that everyone, including his daughters, had betrayed him. Craig's trial started in December 2010. Craig, advised by his lawyer Thomas Heaney, retracted his initial confession. He claimed his actions were due to mental illness and insanity, which was his only defense to avoid the death penalty for the murder of 4 people. Heaney argued that Craig was in a fragile mental state following a series of personal setbacks. His wife had left him for someone else, his children sided with their mother, he lost his job, and had to move back in with his parents. According to Heaney, these factors led to a breakdown, and Craig committed the crime while insane, without realizing what he was doing. However, the prosecution found no evidence of insanity or an altered mental state in Craig's actions. They argued that his actions were calculated, as he had purchased guns and ammunition in advance and went to the victim's house knowing his family was there. He shot each victim twice, ensuring no chance of survival, but intentionally spared his son Sean, allowing him to escape. In August 2011, Craig was found guilty on all counts and received a death sentence. At the final hearing, 12-year-old Sean testified, stating that he didn't want his father to die, as he was his only remaining close relative. Despite multiple appeals by Craig and his lawyers, the verdict has remained unchanged. As of today, Craig is still in prison, fighting to have the case reviewed and the death sentence overturned. After the death of his mother and sisters, Sean moved in with his grandmother. Now Sean has grown up and he has completed his studies and chosen to stay and work in his hometown. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only son among 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Brianna, and grew up in a close-knit family. His parents were caring and provided a comfortable life for their children. Michael's father worked hard to establish his own business, while his mother created a nurturing environment at home that encouraged the growth and development of her children. Michael was a sociable and kind person who excelled in school and sports, earning a black belt in karate that gave him confidence. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a highly sought-after profession that offered good earnings and job prospects. He worked at the Beatrix mine in the small town of Denison, where he was employed at mine number 4. Not content to rest on his laurels, Michael continued his education to become an engineer. In 2011, Michael, then 23 years old, joined a dating site to cope with a recent breakup and expand his social circle. It seemed like a stroke of luck when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling young woman that caught his eye. During the ongoing conversation, the man discovered that they shared common interests. Similar to him, she disliked loud parties and excessive drinking, and sought a genuine, meaningful relationship and a strong family foundation. Michael was pleasantly surprised to find a compatible match online. Living with his parents at the time, he shared his excitement and concerns with his mother. On April 2nd, he confided in her about his upcoming date and made an effort to prepare and make a good impression. He withdrew his first paycheck of 1,000 rand from his account. The only thing that gave him pause was the unusual location his online friend had chosen for their first meeting, the city cemetery. To avoid worrying his parents, he kept this detail to himself. Around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael bid farewell to his family and left the house. He drove to the designated location in his silver Pajero 2007, a gift from his parents for his 18th birthday. As expected, she was running a bit late, but her appearance was striking. She from the internet arrived dressed in a pristine white dress and smiled warmly. The conversation flowed easily, and afterwards, she suggested continuing the evening elsewhere in the cemetery. She invited him to a secluded area with a blanket spread out on the grass, accompanied by a basket of fruit and wine. Michael and his friends had just finished their drinks when his beautiful companion suddenly kissed him. At first, the kiss was pleasant, but it quickly turned into a painful and horrific experience. Unbeknownst to Michael, this kiss was the beginning of a sinister plot. Jane Van Heerden was born in 1991 to parents who were struggling in their marriage. When her mother discovered she was pregnant, they decided to put their divorce on hold and try to work through their issues. However, their efforts were unsuccessful, and the situation at home continued to deteriorate. Unfortunately for Jane, her mother resented her presence, seeing her as a constant reminder of her unhappy marriage. Even after the divorce, Jane's mother held on to her negative feelings, making it difficult for Jane to feel loved and accepted. Jane's behavioral issues and cold demeanor towards her children persisted even after her marriage ended. As a result, her 3 children felt isolated and misunderstood, with Jane, in particular, struggling the most. From a young age, she became withdrawn and sullen, displaying psychological problems. Her behavior became increasingly disturbing, as she frequently talked about death and created confusing artwork. She also developed an imaginary friend named Azael. Her grandparents, concerned about her well-being, suspected she might be possessed and took her to church for an exorcism. During the ritual, Jane's body convulsed, which was likely due to her fear of crowds and the intense anxiety she felt during the ordeal, possibly triggering an epileptic seizure. The traumatic experience had a lasting impact on her memory, causing her to develop a deep-seated fear of the dark. This phobia was further exacerbated by her mother's frightening statement that toys come to life at night, leading Jane to take drastic measures to protect herself, such as taping her doll's eyes shut and restraining them with shoelaces. Jane's mental condition took a turn for the worse as she entered preteen years. At 10 years old, she had a disturbing episode where she threatened a family guest with a knife while visiting her father. This incident prompted her family to seek professional help, and she was evaluated by a specialist who prescribed sedatives. The medication had a positive impact on her mood and overall well-being for a time. During a period of calm, Jane's father made a conscious effort to spend more time with her, often picking her up from school and taking her on hunting trips. He hoped that by sharing his hobby, he could provide her with the attention and connection she craved. Jane found enjoyment in her father's activities, particularly in tasks like butchering and skinning animals. However, this fascination led her to begin collecting and bringing home the carcasses of small animals, starting with rats and birds, and escalating to cats and dogs. She also took to cutting flesh and occasionally self-inflicted injuries. As it turned out, around age 12, Jane had befriended a man who introduced her to substance use and took advantage of her vulnerability. Fortunately, she ended the toxic relationship on her own, although her sisters had initially kept the situation hidden from their parents. Jane's emotional state was negatively affected by her chaotic childhood. At the age of 15, her mother left for New Zealand, where she started a new relationship and never returned to care for her children. Jane and her siblings were left in the care of their father and stepmother, who did their best to provide for them, but struggled to understand the depth of Jane's emotional issues. Her family initially attributed her behavior to typical teenage struggles. However, her situation took a turn for the worse when she became involved with a 22-year-old man who was interested in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. He had a profound influence on Jane, but his cruel nature often left her feeling belittled and suppressed. Fortunately, Jane's life began to turn around with the support of her family and therapy. By the time she turned 17, she had distanced herself from the negative influences in her life, graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. As she lost interest in Satanism and stopped using substances that were harming her, her emotional well-being began to improve. Jane thrived in her studies and landed a job in her field, where she received support from both her colleagues and management. She discovered a natural talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition in her profession. At the same time, she began a romantic relationship with a man named Warren. To those outside her inner circle, Jane's life seemed perfectly ordinary. Her family and close friends avoided discussing her past, hoping that the difficult times were behind her. However, it was unclear what was happening beneath the surface. It's possible that her inner struggles were simply waiting to resurface. Her father, in particular, was overjoyed for Jane, believing she had finally found stability and would soon get married. However, his expectations were not fulfilled. A surprising challenge arose from Warren's friend Roy, a self-proclaimed sensitive person. Although Jane came across as kind and friendly, Roy detected something off-putting and even evil about her. He suspected that Jane might be unfaithful to his friend, so he decided to confront her about it. However, instead of answering his question, Jane became enraged and spat in his face, telling him to stop asking her ridiculous questions. At a party, Jane noticed Martin, a 24-year-old from a well-respected family. Despite his calm and sociable nature, rumors surrounded him. Born into a privileged family, Martin had a happy childhood, excelling academically and behaving well. However, at 6, he began experiencing hallucinations, convinced by an entity that he possessed incredible strength. As he grew older, his mental health declined, and his behavior changed due to struggles at school and home. At 14, Martin was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Unfortunately, standard treatments were ineffective. His financially secure family dedicated themselves to finding alternative medications, eventually discovering the necessary drugs to control his condition, except for occasional aggressive outbursts. Martin was deeply affected by witnessing a stray cat being attacked by dogs. Instead of feeling revulsion or sympathy, he chose to hide the cat's body and observe it. This disturbing incident marked the beginning of his animal torture. He eventually dropped out of school and started working with his father in the carpentry shop, aspiring to follow in his family's footsteps. As he worked, his condition showed signs of improvement, and he lost the desire to harm animals. Feeling in control, he made the decision to stop taking his medication, despite concerns from those around him. However, this decision ultimately proved to be a grave mistake. Martin's mental state gradually declined, and it was during this time that he met Jane. Their relationship seemed happy and normal to outsiders, and their parents were initially pleased with their union. But neither set of parents was aware of the dark history of their children, and their relationship ultimately led to devastating consequences. Initially, they was outgoing and social, attending parties and interacting with others. However, acquaintances began to notice cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. Over time, they became increasingly reclusive and developed an interest in dark and occult practices, including Satanism and voodoo cults. They also became fascinated with notorious serial killers. In February 2011, Martin posted a photo of himself and Jane on social media, with the caption, "Killers," accompanied by a cryptic emoji. At the time, no one suspected that the post was anything more than a joke. Meanwhile, Martin asked Jane's father for permission to marry her, which was met with enthusiasm. However, unbeknownst to those around them, they harbored a sinister secret. Instead of dreaming of a future together, they fantasized about ending their lives in a violent manner. These dark fantasies eventually evolved into a twisted plan to torture and kill homeless individuals. They even practiced their twisted intentions on animals, due to unable to find a suitable human victim to carry out their heinous plan. Jane created a profile on a dating site, which caught the attention of a young man named Michael Van Eck. Jane and her partner, Martin, targeted Michael for their sinister plans. They began flirting with Michael online, and after a few days, Chane suggested they meet in person. Despite the unusual location, Michael agreed to the meeting. Chane and Martin carefully planned the encounter, considering every detail, including their attire and the means to commit a crime. Chane approached the meeting prepared, while Martin hid behind tombstones, waiting for a signal. When Chane kissed Michael, it was the agreed-upon signal for Martin to attack. He struck Michael with a knife from behind, but Michael unexpectedly resisted. Chane intervened, and together they inflicted around 30 knife wounds on Michael. As Michael begged for an end to his suffering, Martin slit his throat, ultimately killing him. The perpetrators then dragged the body onto a blanket and began to carry out their plan. They cut off the victim's legs at the knee and severed his head. The dismembered body parts were placed in bags. The perpetrators attempted to bury the body at the site, but they encountered a problem that they had no shovels. As a result, they were forced to dig a shallow grave using only their hands and knives. After managing to bury the body only halfway, the perpetrators left the scene, taking the severed body parts with them. They used the victim's vehicle to make their getaway, with Martin initially driving, but later handing over control to his accomplice. However, the adrenaline rush from their crime made it difficult for them to focus on the road. Once they arrived home, they stored the bags containing the body parts in the refrigerator, treating them like ordinary groceries. After Martin had somewhat composed himself, he got into the victim's car and drove it to a high-crime neighborhood, hoping that it would be stolen. He left the car unlocked with the keys in the ignition to make it an easy target. A cemetery worker noticed bloody stains and torn clothing in the bushes near the grave. After alerting his supervisor, they called the authorities to report the gruesome find. The police were immediately notified, and an investigation was launched. Meanwhile, Michael Van Eck's parents were frantic with worry. Their son had been unreachable since the previous evening, which was unusual, even if he had stayed overnight with his internet girlfriend. When Michael failed to show up for work, his employer called his parents to ask about his absence. Around the same time, police received a report about an abandoned car with blood stains on the trunk. The vehicle was identified as belonging to Michael Van Eck through a database search. Further investigation revealed that the car had been parked at the cemetery for an extended period. With this new information, police officers visited the Van Eck residence, where they confirmed their suspicions. Michael's mother had been searching for him since the previous day. The officers then asked her to come to the cemetery, where forensic experts and search dogs were working to locate missing body parts. The investigation revealed that the victim's mother identified her son's body through distinctive burn marks he had sustained in childhood. The autopsy confirmed that the victim had suffered multiple knife wounds and showed signs of a struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, which suggested that the perpetrators had some level of expertise in this area. The number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to subdue the victim, indicated that multiple attackers were involved. DNA testing later confirmed the identity of the victim as 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police seized the victim's cell phone and computer, which revealed that the last person he had communicated with was Chane Van Heerden. According to their messages, she had invited him to meet at the cemetery on the night of his death. Detectives brought Chane in for questioning, and she arrived with her boyfriend, Martin. Both were interviewed separately and eventually confessed to being involved in the victim's murder. Upon learning of the incident, Chane's father rushed to the station, where he was shocked to hear the accusations against his daughter. When he asked her if the allegations were true, Chane calmly confirmed her involvement and stated that she would willingly do it again. She claimed that she had fantasized about committing such a crime ever since she started hunting with her father. This cruel confession shocked not only her father but also everyone present. As the case gained public attention, Chane's boyfriend, Martin, also showed no remorse. Instead, He seemed to enjoy the public scrutiny and posed for cameras. It became clear that neither Chane nor Martin felt any regret for their actions. Investigations revealed that they had planned to take their own lives if caught, but Martin's changed his mind, and Chane followed suit. They wanted to live a life of notoriety, embracing their dark impulses. A search of their apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were adorned with distorted portraits of Chane, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears. The rooms also contained ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and other objects of unclear purpose. Police found the deceased young man's belongings, including his glasses and wallet, which Martins later confessed they had taken to prepare their next crime. The most disturbing discovery was made in the refrigerator, where police found Michael's severed head with his mouth sewn shut. It is believed that the perpetrators intended to use his head as a ritualistic bowl. The victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. Additionally, the victim's hand and leg were discovered buried near the murderer's home, alongside the remains of various animals. The perpetrator's diary revealed horrific thoughts and plans for future crimes. The evidence collected during the investigation made it clear that the perpetrators had planned to commit multiple crimes, and that the process of taking lives and mutilating bodies brought them immense pleasure. Martin and Chane underwent multiple evaluations to assess their mental competence. The commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and understood the consequences. In November 2011, Chane's trial took place. Despite this being her first offense, she was treated as a serial offender. She openly expressed her desire to repeat her actions and told the court that she understood she should feel shame or remorse, but couldn't. She could only comprehend the severity of her actions through societal standards and the reactions of others. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chane with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, which made her more dangerous than her boyfriend. However, she was skilled at hiding her true nature. Throughout the sentencing, Chane remained impassive. She was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole, 20 years for taking a life and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martin defended himself in court, claiming he didn't remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, and said his relationship with Chane led them to commit the crime. He apologized to the victim's parents, but his words seemed insincere. He was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with a chance for parole after serving half his sentence. Even in prison, Martin expressed his passion for Chane in letters, calling her a dark goddess. However, Chane eventually ended the relationship, feeling they had grown apart. While incarcerated, Chane proved to be a model prisoner, using her time to teach art and theology to her fellow inmates. In contrast, Martin, while also in prison, gained a small group of admirers who were carefully monitored by police to prevent them from copying his crimes. During his imprisonment, Martins focused on personal growth, completing his education through correspondence courses and undergoing therapy. Their stories serve as a warning that ordinary individuals can hide dark secrets. Michael, a kind and compassionate person, was manipulated by two individuals with twisted motivations. This tragic event emphasizes the importance of being cautious about the people we surround ourselves with, as their influence can have a profound and lasting impact on our lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabriela Alcano. Gabriela Alcano was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, the capital city of Chile. She was the only child of Federico Alino and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, close-knit family. Her paternal uncle, Rodrigo, who served as her godfather, and her grandfather, Carlos, both adored her deeply, with Carlos regarding her as the central figure in his life. Gabriella grew up in a loving and supportive environment, despite her family's modest means. Her parents, though not wealthy, worked hard to provide her with a good education and upbringing. When Gabriella was 5, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father, however, remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriella and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriella was a sweet and friendly child who was a bit shy but made friends easily. Her gentle nature and lovely appearance earned her admiration from those around her. She excelled academically, enjoyed music, dance, and art, and her parents encouraged her talents. Gabriella cherished her relationships with her younger half-brothers, spending quality time with them at her father's nearby home during weekends and holidays. Overall, Gabriella's childhood was a happy and carefree time, filled with love and support from her family. Gabriella's first love was at the age of 15. She fell for Fabian Chasis Aravan, a fellow student who was a year older. At first, their relationship was innocent and sweet. They would walk together, share ice cream, and steal kisses. Fabian came from a good family with well-respected parents who valued education and raised him to be a good person. However, Fabian was a quiet and private person who struggled with social interactions. He would avoid eye contact and turn away from others, leading many to think he was just shy. Gabriella's father met Fabian and thought he was a calm, dependable, and responsible young man. He had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriella, and Fabian promised to do so. Initially, Fabian made an effort to be attentive and caring. However, as time passed, a different side of Fabian emerged. He became controlling and cruel, revealing a darker aspect of his personality. Fabian's controlling behavior dominated the relationship. He was intensely jealous and dictated who Gabriella could and couldn't interact with. He monitored her phone activity, insisting on instant responses to his calls and messages, regardless of the time. If she failed to comply, he would throw tantrums, displaying childish and abusive behavior. During the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriella attempted to downplay Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, believing they would eventually subside. Blinded by her love for him, she tried to meet all his demands and held on to the hope that he would revert to the caring and gentle person she initially fell in love with. Fabian's behavior became increasingly irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He emotionally drained Gabriella, progressing from verbal abuse to physical mistreatment. He would slap her, pull her hair, or grab her hands, often leaving no visible marks. However, bruises would occasionally appear on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. Gabriella tried to hide her situation, but her loved ones noticed her depressed state and frequent tears. She was no longer her usual cheerful and outgoing self, instead withdrawing from friends and avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from seeing. Gabriella repeatedly tried to end her relationship with Fabian, but he would not let her go. Despite her efforts to break free, he would pressure her into getting back together. This cycle of breaking up and reuniting continued for over a year, marked by Fabian's stalking, threats, and harassment. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. Although the details of the incident were unclear, he was accused of mistreatment and assault, which could have led to jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school. He was forced to complete his education through homeschooling. When Gabriella finally decided to end the relationship for good, Fabian became angry and desperate. He apologized and promised to change, begging her to take him back. However, when she refused, he began to stalk and harass her. He would show up at her school or home, even attempting to climb into her room through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, trying to intimidate her into resuming their relationship. Gabriella was determined to end the relationship, despite Fabian's erratic behavior. His messages veered wildly from apologetic to threatening, but she remained resolute. However, Fabian's actions were unpredictable and frightening. He would often vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had moved on, only to reappear and resume his harassment. Fabian's behavior was relentless and intrusive. He would follow Gabriella everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing public scenes. His outbursts were loud and intimidating, leaving Gabriella feeling anxious and fearful. As a result, she became reluctant to be alone, always seeking the company of friends or family after school. She would often meet her mother at work and travel home with her, or ask her father or uncle to accompany her on trips. This constant vigilance took a toll on Gabriella, leaving her exhausted and drained over several months. A devastating series of events began to unfold for the Alcano family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife, taking her life in a tragic turn of events. At the time, the children were at school and Federico was at work, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Fortunately, the perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior conviction, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother rallied around Federico, offering emotional support and helping him care for the children during this difficult time. Although Gabriella's thoughts were temporarily diverted from Fabian, who had gone missing around the same time, she remained focused on her own goals. She was busy preparing for entrance exams, hoping to secure a spot at one of Santiago's most prestigious universities, where she aspired to study journalism or advertising. However, this tragedy was only the beginning of a series of heartbreaking events that would soon befall the Alcano family. In May 2018, Fabian suddenly re-emerged, beginning a campaign of obsessive stalking that made Gabriella feel unsafe in all aspects of her life. He was able to access her property by climbing over the fence and even showed up at places she regularly visited, such as the supermarket and the mall. By early June, Gabriella was so alarmed by his behavior that she sent screenshots of her disturbing messages with Fabian to her two closest friends, including audio recordings where he explicitly threatened her and demanded they restart their relationship. Gabriella was secretly living in fear for her own safety and that of her loved ones, but she chose not to share her concerns with her family to avoid causing them unnecessary worry. On June 10, 2018, the Alino family came together to celebrate a milestone birthday, Carlos's 80th. Tragically, this joyful gathering would turn out to be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening had begun on a happy note, with the house filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of a big family meal. As they celebrated Carlos's special day, everyone wished him good health and many more years to come. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and her uncle Rodrigo's children, but despite the festive atmosphere, she seemed somewhat preoccupied and distant. Her uncle noticed her unease and decided to approach her, asking if everything was okay and if something was troubling her. Gabriella gave a sad smile and shrugged, but didn't explain why she was nervous. Her uncle chose not to pry, thinking she would open up when she was ready. However, he later regretted not pressing her for more information. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and reassured her that she could always count on him for support. He then returned home with his younger children. Tragically, this was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and first wife alive. In the early hours of June 11th, a horrific crime took place. Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He planned to sneak into Gabriella's bedroom through the window and attack her. However, just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on, and the back door creaked open. Carolina, who had been unable to sleep, had gotten up to investigate the noise. Fabian pounced on her, pushing her back inside, and began stabbing her repeatedly. Fabian brutally stabbed his Carolina 36 times, with most of the wounds inflicted on her chest, neck, and head. This attack was fatal and left her with no chance of survival. Carolina only managed to scream a couple of times before falling silent. The noise from the attack woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to see what was happening. As she went down, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and clearly enraged. He caught hold of her and dragged her down. Gabriella was desperately trying to call the emergency services with her phone, but she couldn't make the call. In a horrific act, Fabian attacked Carolina and stabbed her once in the chest, piercing her heart and instantly killing her. He then moved her body to the kitchen. After the murder, Fabian tried to cover his tracks by wiping away his fingerprints and cleaning the bloody footprints. He also washed himself and the knife in the bathroom. After cleaning up, Fabian left the house quietly around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. Following the event, Federico appeared unaffected. However, concerns grew when Carolina, typically a reliable and communicative colleague, missed work for 2 consecutive days without answering her phone. Her employer contacted Federico, asking him to find out what had happened to Carolina. When questioned, Federico was surprised and claimed to have called Carolina, but she was unreachable, as was Gabriella, whose phone was off. Next, Federico phoned his brother, Rodrigo, but Rodrigo stated that he had neither seen nor heard from the missing individuals since their friend's birthday. Following the phone call, Federico decided to pay a visit to Carolina's home. The property appeared uninhabited. Nonetheless, Carolina's vehicle remained in the garage. Without forcibly entering, despite possessing a spare key, Federico merely checked on the status of the property. Federico called the police and asked them to check the house, but he didn't enter himself because he was afraid of what he might find. The police officers were puzzled by this, especially since he had a key. When they finally entered the house at 11 a.m., they found the lifeless bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor, surrounded by pools of blood. Despite the obvious fact that the women had been dead for over a day, Federico was overcome with grief and irrationally demanded that the police call an ambulance to save them. The police had to calm Federico down, but his behavior raised suspicions, and they took him outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he became agitated and demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was the main suspect in the double homicide. Federico was shocked and devastated by this turn of events, unable to comprehend how he could be suspected of killing his own daughter. Rodrigo arrived shortly after and was equally shocked to learn that his brother had not been released. He was also struggling to come to terms with the investigation revealed that Gabriella's friends reported that she was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, Fabian. Screenshots of his threatening messages and voice recordings, which included a disturbing phrase, "It's easier to take her life than to let her go," were also obtained. This came as a shock to Federico, Gabriella's father, who recalled that Fabian seemed pleasant when they first met, despite his daughter's failed attempts to break up with him. The contrast between the heinous crime and the normalcy of Fabian's daily life, where he spent time with family and friends and posted light-hearted photos on social media, made his crime all the more inconceivable. After being taken into custody, Fabian responded to allegations with pretended astonishment and anguish, falsely claiming his innocence and feigning affection for Gabriella. Fabian had gotten rid of the object used to commit the murder and thrown away some clothes with blood on them. However, there were still small drops of blood on his shoes, and footprints matching his shoes were found at the scene of the crime. Additionally, 4 of Gabriella's classmates said they heard Fabian threaten her, saying it would be easier to kill her than let her go. Because of the evidence and what the witnesses said, Fabian admitted to the crime, but tried to make himself look like a lover who was deeply hurt. The defendant claimed that his intention was not to harm Gabriella, but rather to have a conversation with her. However, the situation escalated, and he ultimately treated her mother as an unwanted witness. He struggled to provide a reasonable explanation for bringing a hunting knife to the encounter, which was supposedly meant to be a conversation. Following the autopsy and other necessary examinations, the victims' bodies were released to their family for burial. A large crowd gathered at the funeral to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was laid to rest in a white dress she had always wanted to wear but never had the chance to. Coralina was buried in a closed casket due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who developed a strong defense strategy, aiming to secure a minimal sentence for his client. During the initial court hearings, the lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean record, pointing out that the attack on his classmate had been resolved outside of court. However, the victim's family pushed for a more severe charge of femicide, which was rejected by the prosecution due to the specific requirements of Chile's law. Since Fabian and the victim were not in a romantic relationship at the time of the crime, the case did not meet the criteria for femicide. The lawyer also argued that Fabian had acted on impulse and was in a state of distress when he committed the crime. As a result, Fabian faced a potential 15-year sentence for the double homicide and assault charges. The victim's family, understandably, demanded the maximum punishment for Fabian. After the initial hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious. He lost 2 loved ones to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the murders of his ex-wife and daughter might receive a lenient sentence. The defense lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this excuse. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights groups, proposed Gabriella's Law. This law would broaden the definition of femicide to include intimate partner violence, regardless of whether they was married or cohabiting. The National Office for Women and Gender Equality soon joined the cause, actively pushing for the law. Although the bill faced opposition due to concerns that it could lead to new charges and stricter penalties for perpetrators already in prison, feminist groups nationwide rallied behind the Zunino family. They organized marches and demonstrations in support of Gabriella's Law. In August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, significant changes were made to Chile's femicide law. Known as Gabriella's Law, these amendments aimed to strengthen the country's response to violence against women. The law now defines femicide as any act of violence, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to hatred based on her gender, regardless of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Additionally, the law considers it an aggravating circumstance if the victim is a minor or has health issues. In April 2022, Fabian Series went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years earlier. Thanks to Gabriella's Law, the defense had limited options. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances because one of the victims was a minor, as well as with double homicide and assault. On April 20th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was delivered, Federico and Rodrigo spoke to the court, expressing their gratitude to the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no punishment could restore the life of their loved ones, Carolina and Gabriella, but emphasized that a life sentence for the perpetrator would serve as a safeguard, protecting other women from suffering a similar tragic fate.